How's it going, people? It's Anton Jackson. Really excited to talk about Season 3, Episode 3 of Better Call Saul. This opening scene of this Episode 3 really reminded me of Breaking Bad. It was eerily similar to Breaking Bad, in my opinion. It reminded me of the numerous flash forwards we got in Breaking Bad, where a small part of the plot was originally introduced, and by the conclusion of the episode revealed to the mysteries and the secrecy surrounding the opening. In this opening scene, we see the Los Pollos Hermanos truck driving through Mexico, and we see some interesting foreshadowing with the bullet-ridden sneakers that are tied and thrown on the electrical wire, as well as a bullet-ridden stop sign. Before I break down this episode act by act in too much detail, my initial impressions of the episode was it was a little bit slow. It was definitely probably the least exciting of the first 3 episodes of Breaking Bad so far. After watching this episode, this definitely seemed like a setup episode to set us up for the remainder of the season. A lot of story to tell in this episode, a lot of plot development, a lot of intricate details were revealed in this episode. So there wasn't too much action. There were a few good scenes that I'll break down in a few minutes, but all in all, it was a pretty slow-moving episode. That's not to say I didn't enjoy it. I thought it was really well written. I thought it was really interesting. It was interesting to see a lot of the backstory of Breaking Bad revealed in this episode. And additionally, it was really interesting to see the first conversation ever between Mike Ehrmantraut and Gustavo Fring. Again, not too much revealed in this conversation. It wasn't too surprising. This is what I thought they were going to talk about. This seems very likely, as we all know from our experience watching Breaking Bad, that Gus did not want Mike to kill Hector Salamanca to this point because he needs Hector to do business with. But he's perfectly okay with Mike messing with him to get back at Hector, as we all know, based on the personal vendetta that Gus has for Hector. What was great about this scene was we got to see some Breaking Bad characters reintroduced. They didn't have any dialogue, but we could definitely see them in the background. The first character, of course, was Viktor, who we saw in the previous episode in passing, driving the Cadillac and smoking a cigarette outside Los Pollos Hermanos. But the other character that really intrigued me more was Tyrus, because originally we don't meet Tyrus in Breaking Bad until Season 4. And my initial impression of Tyrus was that he wasn't involved in Gustavo's meth empire until after Viktor was killed. Because as we all know, after Season 4, Episode 1 of Breaking Bad, when Gus slits Viktor's throat for being seen by the bystanders after Gale was shot by Jesse, Tyrus in effect takes Viktor's place. But according to this episode, we now see that Tyrus was involved with Gus's meth empire well preceding when we first meet him in Season 4 in Breaking Bad. So I understand why they added Tyrus into the scene. You know, they're really trying to bring back as many Breaking Bad characters as possible. But this kind of raises more questions than answers, if we're being completely honest. Because I wonder what Tyrus was doing all throughout Season 2 and Season 3 of Breaking Bad. So obviously, as we see, Tyrus wasn't originally introduced until Season 4, but I think the writers found a pretty decent way to introduce him into Better Call Saul pretty organically. But again, this raises questions of what he was doing all throughout Season 3 and Season 2 of Breaking Bad. But I think this is just kind of a minor oversight, and it's almost me being very picky and being a super fan of Breaking Bad. But it was great to see the reemergence of Tyrus, even in a small background role. I think that might have been a pretty subtle Easter egg for super Breaking Bad fans, but I really enjoyed seeing Tyrus in this scene. The following act, we get right back into the plot of Chuck and Jimmy. And to tell you the truth, this was a pretty heavy scene when I watched it. To see Jimmy waiting on the street curb, waiting for the police to arrest him and take him to jail. After Chuck implores Jimmy to turn his life around, and Jimmy responds by saying, "One of these days, you're gonna be dying and no one's gonna be there beside you, and you're gonna die alone." That was a pretty heavy scene for me to watch. What's so tough about this scene is Jimmy might be right, because when we meet Jimmy in Breaking Bad, he doesn't ever mention his brother. And knowing Chuck going forward, it's very likely that Jimmy's prediction of what the end of his life is going to be is pretty true. And it's really sad when you think about it, because I think at the end of the day, these two people really love each other. Chuck and Jimmy really are fond of each other and truly love each other as brothers. But I think their personalities are just so contentious at this moment. It really seems as though their relationship is going to end. Following this scene, we get to see the plot unravel from Kim's perspective. I thought this was a really interesting scene to see this kind of morning routine video montage of Kim. And again, I find myself pretty surprised by how stoic Kim is through this whole ordeal. Kim is a pretty cool-tempered, strong character. She's really handling the situation very well. Additionally, in this episode, we see another Breaking Bad character revival, and that, of course, is Gus's doctor, who we all remember from Season 4 after Gus poisoned the entire cartel, saved his life after Gus took the poison as well. Again, I really enjoyed the Breaking Bad Easter eggs in this scene when Mike was at the doctor's office, and he's going back to his car after buying the drugs from him. We see the chickens just loitering around his car, and this reminded me of when Season 5, when Mike is recovering from his gunshot wound, him feeding the chickens. I really enjoyed that scene, and it was a nice recall back to Breaking Bad. Another very cool scene in this episode is when we get to see Jimmy McGill go through the booking process after he's arrested. It's pretty, almost a little bit surreal to finally see Saul Goodman in jail. Another scene I really enjoyed in this episode is his back and forth rapport with the district attorney, who we originally met in Season 1 of Better Call Saul, the petty with the prior district attorney. I thought that was some much needed comic relief in the episode. I really enjoy his character. There's a great back and forth relationship that he has with Jimmy McGill. So at the end of this episode, we really get to see Mike's plot develop. I thought it was a really cool scene when we finally figure out why he put the shoes on the electrical wire. It was all part of an intricate plan to get the drug residue on the Regalo Helado truck, the truck belonging to Hector Salamanca, and to get his drivers arrested and to further infuriate and make the legal situation difficult for Hector Salamanca. Going forward, it was interesting in this episode. If you notice the intro scene, the stop sign is bullet-ridden and the shoes are quite torn up and destroyed by the sand and the wind. But in the scene we see of Mike throwing the shoes on the electrical wire, the stop sign is completely brand new. There are no bullet holes in it whatsoever, and the shoes are in pristine, mint condition. So the introduction scene to this episode seems to have taken place very far in the future. So again, I think this is some pretty interesting foreshadowing in this episode, and hopefully the reveal will be really exciting in the episodes moving forward in this season. Additionally, at the end of this episode, we get to see the plot progress with Jimmy as well. It's revealed to us that it turns out Chuck didn't want Jimmy to go to jail. This whole master plan was to just get Jimmy disbarred. As we know, Chuck is pretty adamant about his views about the sanctity of the law, and he cannot, with his good moral well-being, allow Jimmy to continue practicing and making a mockery of the law in this way. So he doesn't want Jimmy to have to go to jail, because I truly think he loves Jimmy, and he doesn't want to see him suffer in that way. So yeah, moving forward, I don't think we'll see Jimmy in jail, because we see Jimmy as Saul Goodman practicing law in New Mexico, and I think it's very unlikely for a convicted felon to be able to be an attorney. I'm not too familiar with the actual laws regarding practicing law in New Mexico, but it'll be interesting to see what happens to Jimmy in this case moving forward. So all in all, I thought this episode was a little slow. It wasn't that exciting. We did get to see some plot development, which I thought was pretty interesting. But personally, I hope that the plot definitely picks up and gets a little more exciting moving forward. And based on the revelations and the new characters that were brought to us in this episode, I have a strong feeling that it should pick up and get a lot more exciting in the next episodes of the season moving forward. As a big fan of Better Call Saul and Breaking Bad, there are two major plot developments which I'd really hope to see in this season of Better Call Saul, or in the seasons moving forward if we are so lucky to have many more seasons after Season 3. And those two plot developments are, one, getting to know a little bit more about the backstory of Gustavo Fring in Chile. There's definitely a mystery surrounding Gustavo Fring's background in Chile and Breaking Bad. It was only hinted to and alluded to in Breaking Bad, and we didn't really get to see any great detail of his backstory in Chile. So it's going to be really interesting to see if the writers decide to add that to Better Call Saul. Excuse me. I'd be really happy we got to see that moving forward. I think a lot of Breaking Bad fans are really interested and excited to see Gustavo Fring's background come to light in Better Call Saul. The other thing I would hopefully like to see is more of Gene as the manager of Cinnabon in Omaha. I think this is a really interesting plot point in Better Call Saul, and I really think the writers could do a lot with this. I'm not sure if they're intending on having or building upon these intros that we've seen in the first 3 seasons of Better Call Saul, but it'll be interesting to see if they decide to have more of the flash forward to Jimmy McGill turned Gene. Alright, thanks a lot for watching my review. My name's Anton Jackson. I really enjoy doing these reviews, and I'm really looking forward to the rest of the season of Better Call Saul.